Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are working on some brake ducts. So if you guys been following the car a little bit, you know that I have custom set of brake ducts on the front of the lower grille on the WRX, and had actually a viewer or an Instagram follower reach out and ask me if I could make him ducts similar to mine for his car. And so kind of agreed and figured, while we're making them, we can also film it, and maybe you guys can do something similar, or maybe it'll inspire you guys to do something for your car. Just a note, this isn't perfect. There are some things that you'll need to finagle when it comes to these brake ducts. And if you have a 18 and up bumper, this process is not going to work for you because the Lower Grille is different. But maybe you watch the video and you'll come up with a way to make it work for your car. So I'm trying to keep it all nice because I got to ship it out to the guy. But this is the Lower Grille for the stock 15, 16, 17 WRX and STI. And for the most part, if you have this year or this year bumper, you can pretty much just follow this video step by step and make a set of brake ducts similar for your car. So let me show you what we're going to use today. Okay, so what do we need to kind of get this done? You need a lower grille. You could reuse the lower grille off your bumper. Sort of kind of a pain in the butt because you got to take it off, put the bumper back on, and then work with the lower grille. If you are planning on doing it all in one day, then I guess it doesn't really matter. So you do need a lower grille. You're going to need these 3-inch flanges. So these are 3-inch diameter flanges, or 3-inch inner diameter, and then this actual, including this flange, is 4 inches. And that's going to be on the back side of this. That's where your brake hose duct is going to clamp on. You're going to need a hole saw. So here's an assorted hole saw kit, and we're specifically going to use the 3-inch one. You drill. You need some assorted drill bits. What we're going to be doing here is drilling some holes so we can put some bolts through the flange and into the lower grille. So you need some drill bits for that. You're going to need some Riv Nuts. So we've got some Riv Nuts here and a Riv Nut tool. It's not the best way to secure this flange to the lower grille, but it's worked so far over the last 9 months on my car. Riv Nuts really want to secure themselves on a steel, something kind of thin where it kind of pinches down on the metal. The lower grille is made out of plastic, so it's kind of soft. This kind of wedges itself in. I've actually used some super glue as well when kind of securing the Riv Nut to keep it from falling out or twisting when you start to tighten your screw in to hold the flange down. It's worked on my car, just don't over torque it, and you should be fine. And I think that's about it. Obviously a bench and a vise to hold this when we start doing some drilling. So let's go ahead and the first thing we're going to do is make a 3-inch cut into the lower grille and just make sure we can slide our intake flange into the lower grille. Alright, so here we have our grille, here we have our flange, and here we have our hole saw. So you can see here 3 and 3, so 3 inches. The hole saw uses, it's going to be this one, a drill bit that helps keep it in place as you drill in. Put that on real quick just so you guys can see. Otherwise the actual saw will kind of like, it'll want to walk, or the hole saw will want to walk. And really there's only one spot where this works well. And if I remember right, it's right here. It's like right on the edge of this kind of diamond pattern, is where it kind of centers up. And yeah, kind of tuck that into the edge, and that'll be the center of the hole. And then what we'll need to do is we'll likely need to shave this lip, and this lip. But before we do that, let's go ahead and make our holes. I forgot to put this kind of locking collar thing. Oh, maybe here. Forgot to put this locking collar thing on the hole saw, so if you have one, use it. Or if it comes with one, use it. And so this is where we're going to drill, right in this diamond. And we'll give it a shot. Here we go. No turning back now. Alright, that's it. So it obviously looks a little rough around the edges, but that's okay, because we have a flange, and boom. Not too bad. Alright, so you see this fits in here. Actually fits in pretty good, but the problem is there's this like channel that runs around the lower grille, and that clips into the bumper, so you can't have this flange be in the way. So we're going to have to shave that stuff off later. But let's go ahead and do the other side here. So the drill bit actually fell out right at the end of that. I don't know if you caught it in the video, you could see it like fall to the ground. In that case, it doesn't really matter because the hole saw already had bitten into like the lower grille. But went ahead, put it back on, tighten it down. Hopefully it doesn't fall off this time. And I think we're going to shoot again for this diamond towards the outside edge. So we'll go ahead and do this one. Cool. Whoa. I'll get that in a second. All right, let's go get the other flange. Boom. I don't know if you can see all of that there. Looks pretty good. All right, so as I had said earlier, if we look in here, there's a channel that has a clips that'll clip into the lower grille. So you can't keep this flange from blocking this kind of channel. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark off where I need to shave down to, so that we can kind of clear this channel. And there's going to be 3 spots. There's going to be here, where it kind of interferes with the grill itself, and then down here. Okay, so got a ruler, square, whatever you got there, and there's this inner line here, and I'm just going to draw that line over that flange. So I'll use the ruler to line me up on that inner line, and then just mark it off. And this one's curved over here, so it might take a couple, sorry, forgot you guys can't see that. This one's curved over here. It's a curved line, so it might take a couple tries with kind of either your cutting tool or your sanding tool, but just give yourself a rough line. And then up here, what I'll do is I usually just kind of mark off where I need to sand, and that's kind of just by touch or by feel. All right, let's start cutting this flange. Okay, I actually got the grinder out, or this like benchtop sander, instead of the multi-tool, because this might actually work quicker. So we'll see here. I'm also wearing a mask because I was told that aluminum dust is pretty bad on the lungs, or can be tough on the lungs. So I'm just trying here to protect myself. So let's see how this goes. Alright, so here it is, all cut into the grill. This edge looks pretty good, and this edge looks pretty good. I could maybe take a little bit more off, but right now what's actually stopping from this sitting all the way in is this edge right here. So I'm gonna quickly take a little bit off here and then test fit this again. All right, let's take a look here. So I sanded down or ground down a little more. Ooh, that fits. I think it's fit. That's all the way down. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's all the way down. That's pretty good. So I don't remember if I can be right on the line. I think I can. I think as long as you're on this kind of line here, on this inner channel, it'll clear the lower bumper. Because this is going to someone that isn't me, and they may or may not have the tools, I'm going to just grind off a little bit more just to make sure that when they get it, they can actually install it without having to kind of fuss around with it. Alright, so this side is done. Now what I'm going to do is pretty much the exact same thing on the other side of the grill. Alright, and figured you guys don't have to watch this, so let me take care of that real quick, and then I'll go ahead and show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so forgot what side it was already. Maybe it was this side? Yeah, I think it was this side. So this side is now done, and looks pretty good, fits there pretty well. The next thing we're going to do is make some block-off plates. So we've got aluminum plates here that will cover up the duct. And what this will do is when you're not at the track, or when you don't need to run the brake ducts, you can put these on. Remember, this is a 4-inch flange, so this is a 4-inch diameter plate. And all we're really going to do is take this, flip it over, see how pretty much line up there, like that, and we're going to start cutting. So I'm going to make markings as to how these two line up, and then sand accordingly. And that should be just about it. It looks like this 4-inch circle is not exactly 4 inches, which kind of sucks, but it'll be sticking up off the flange or up off the inlet, so it should be okay. So I'm going to start by marking off where I need to grind off on the plates. And at this point, just remember that the two plates are not symmetrical, so you got to start labeling what side is what, because they're not interchangeable at all. And you can see here, I put D for driver's side, D for driver's side. That way I don't get them mixed up. Cool, so now I'm gonna grind this plate. Okay, so both the plates have been ground down. This is driver's side. So the driver's side intake here, or inlet. There's your cover plate, or block off plate. The plate is slightly bigger than the flange, but there's nothing I can really do about that. I think these plates were cut slightly too big from the manufacturer, but it won't matter here when you put it on. Look at this one, it's pretty good. Like that. Or like that. And so if we actually drop these into the grill here, when you put the plate on, let's try one like this. No, this. I forget already. It's confusing. Like that. Yeah, when you put the plate on, it sits off the flange, so even if it's not perfect, you can't really tell. Looks pretty good. So the next part is sort of the don't mess up or F up part, and let me kind of reset here and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so now what we need to do is drill our holes into the flange and into the grill. And there's going to be 3 holes, one here, and one here. And you kind of need to kind of eyeball where you're going to position it. So if we think about what's behind the flange, we got some good meat to work with on this side, some meat to work with on this side, and some meat to work with on this side. Right, so go ahead, drop it in. Make sure our lines are lined up so we look pretty good. And maybe one here, and one here. Right? Cool. And so now we're going to drill these holes into the flange. Okay, so I'm just going to center punch these holes so we can try to keep our drill bit from walking. Should be pretty good. I've got a vise underneath this towel here. And let me go get the drill and the bit. All right, so the flange is secured in the vise. And I'm just gonna drill through here. There we go. All right, so we got our flange back into our lower grill here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to position my flange so it lines up nicely and you know, lines up with this line here that's on the inside of this groove, or this clip, the channel that clips into the bumper. And once I get that all lined up to where I want it, I'll hold the flange in place, and I'm going to follow through the holes that I've drilled in the flange into the lower grill. Okay, so now I've got the 3 holes that I use my flange to guide, as a guide to drill into the lower grill here. Now I've got I think this is an M3 Riv Nut, and so I'm going to enlarge the holes with the correct size drill bit such that I can slide my Riv Nut in. So let me go figure out what the right size bit is, and then we're going to enlarge these holes. All right, so I've selected the drill bit that I think will work with our Riv Nut. So I'm going to go through and enlarge the holes on the grill. Okay, so I'm going to leave the Riv Nuts where they are right now, and I've got a reason for that, I think. Got an idea, actually. And what I'm going to do is work on the cover plate, or the block-off plate. So it's going to be the same idea. I'm going to use the flange as kind of a guide as to how to drill into the cover plate. And I've got everything lined up here. Fortunately, I tried to use a center punch and a drive punch, and it didn't work out. So I'm going to have to hold the flange here and just use the drill and the drill bit. So there's that. I used a piece of wood underneath. Let me go grab a screw. So these are M3 by 0.5 screws, and I'm going to use that to try to help hold everything in line here. Okay, so I've got one drilled, and I've taken a M3 screw. It's an M3 by 0.5. Run it through and used a Riv Nut to kind of clamp this down. Then I'll kind of line everything up here as good as I can. It's not going to be 100% perfect, but it's going to be pretty close. At least that was the idea. And then we'll drill our next hole. Drop that in. Looks pretty good. Let me get another Riv Nut here. And what I'll do here real quick is grab the grill. And we'll just drop this into the grill here real quick and just make sure everything's lining up good. Alright, so there it is. That bottom edge looks okay. There might be some interference here, so we might want to grind some of this off. And then this edge Looks a little bit long, so we'll take that down as well. But before I do that, I'll go ahead and drill the last hole. So one of the reasons why I'm drilling them and then using the bolts to kind of lock them in place is previously I marked them with a Sharpie on the first one I did, the first brake dead set I did, and then drilled the hole. And then what ended up happening was it shifted a little bit, and so I couldn't screw these through, and I had to widen out these holes a little bit. Doing it like this, I think, is probably the smarter way to do it, and you won't have to run into the same issue I did. Right now I'm going to go back to the grinder, and I'm going to take this lip down on the cover plate a little bit, and maybe this top part, and then we can do the riv nuts. Okay, so ground everything down a little bit. Went ahead and flipped the riv nuts around so that they're protruding out the back. That way I can drop it into the grill, and although the riv nuts won't sit all the way in, they should just get into the holes, and I can get a good idea of what it's going to look like when it's dropped in. And I can kind of tell here, this line right here is good. Down here it clears it by a lot, which is great. This one's a little close, and we could potentially clearance that a little more, so we'll go ahead and regrind that, or just grind some more off here. I'm pretty happy with the fitment of everything right now. Looks pretty good to me, clears here. And now we can secure the riv nuts to the grill, and there's the reason why I didn't do that earlier is because on my previous grill I had some troubles with the screws screwing all the way into the riv nuts once we had everything on. And I think what was happening was that the riv nuts, because this grill is actually curved, the way the riv nuts were sitting into the grill were not in line with the flange and the block off plate. So I want to try to use the riv nut tool with the flange and the block off plate on the tool, and hopefully that'll help align the riv nuts inside of the grill. So we'll give that a shot here right now, and I'll show you how I plan on doing that. Okay, before we get to the riv nuts, let me just show you how the tool works. I think it's probably good to kind of have like an understanding. So the tool goes into the drill. Like that. And you thread the riv nut on like that, right? And then we would set this into the grill, and then what will end up happening is when I drive the tool forward, it pulls the riv nut in. You see how it's getting closer to the snout, and then when it hits the snout, there you go. It forms that little lip, and it pinches down on the grill. Okay, the problem that we have here is that there's a gap between the flange and the grill. So there's a space between the flange and the grill, and if we just stick the block off plate and then the flange on here and then the riv nut behind it, and then stick the whole assembly into the grill, it'll just draw the riv nut up out of the grill and up against the kind of our inlet. So we need to space it off, and so I'll show you here what I mean. Oops. Right, so if we put this tool through here, and we put the riv nut on the back of this, right? Where the grill sits down here is like down here, but if we pull on this, it's just going to pull it out of the grill. So we need a have a spacer of some sort that'll keep the riv nut pressed up against the grill and give us a surface that we can pull against. So I've got a series of washers here, and we'll drop this in like that, and then what we'll do is we'll drop a couple washers on. I don't know how many yet. I bought a boatload, so we'll have more than enough to see how much we need to actually reach the grill, and then we can put riv nut on. Hopefully that works. So this may be hard to see, but here you see the riv nut tool, the block off plate, the intake, the stack of washers, and then the riv nut down there. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Okay, that might be better. And so you see the riv nut tool, block off plate, intake or inlet, stack of washers, and then the riv nut. And I have the other riv nuts set into the hole, so it looks pretty good. The only thing I can see here is that the riv nut's coming out slightly, so I'm going to add maybe a washer or two there, and then we should be good to go. Okay, so I got the riv nut tool hooked into the drill. Ooh, that's a lot. And now I've got some super glue here. Oh man, that glue is just, that's intense. All right, so it's very gooey, which is not what I'm used to when it comes to super glue. Normally super glue is like kind of liquidy. All right, so I'm gonna get it on the riv nut there. Looks like I accidentally got it on some of the washers. Might be a challenge afterwards. I'm gonna get it in the hole too. Alright, put that back. Hopefully that doesn't super glue shut. It's gonna suck. Alright. It's nice, it's good, it's in there. Alright, so that's the first one. And what I also want to do is put some super glue on the back of that, just to kind of reinforce that, but we might do that afterwards. I'm going to let that dry. So we'll let that dry here really quick, and then we'll work on the next one. Okay, so the other thing I've done here is I've gone in with the super glue on the backside and around the riv nut, just kind of run the brush around the grill as well as the riv nut itself, just to give it a little extra holding strength or whatever you want to call it. Something's up with this glue. It's taking a long time to dry. Normally super glue is like super fast. So I might leave that where it is on that side and go and work on the other intake duct here, just as that dries, and then I can kind of show you how to do the rest of it. And for the most part, that's going to be kind of the brake duct for the lower grill, but we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so the 3 riv nuts have been installed and the super glue is drying. In some instances, it's kind of hard to get the riv nut to actually grab into the lower grill. And again, as we were discussing before, riv nuts were never really designed to work with plastic, right? So it's kind of just trying to wedge itself in there. And you can kind of test it by if you were to put the flange on or the intake on and try to screw it in. As you draw it in, it might get tight, either because it's cross-threading because you don't have the riv nut in the right plane in relation to the inlet, or maybe it's tight, right? Like, because it is curved, you're kind of like pulling down onto the grill, and it's getting tight. And if the riv nut suddenly lets go, then likely you're going to have to take it out and use a boatload of super glue. And really, that's kind of like the only fix it if the riv nut doesn't grab. And really, you should just do both, right? Try to get the grab. If it doesn't grab, just use a boatload of super glue. Get it on the front, around the riv nut, underneath the lip, and onto the grill, and then get it onto the back, again, around the riv nut. Be liberal with it, let it dry, and just know that when you are removing the block off plate and screwing everything back in, or when you're removing the screws to put the block off plate back on, don't over tighten. You don't have to over tighten, right? The speed of the car going around the track is going to hold everything in place. Really, the screws are just there to make sure you can take the block off plate on and off. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do the other side now, and then we'll show you the finished product. Oh, no, actually, there's one other thing we need to do once everything's dried, and that's going to be around this circle. We are going to be installing the brake duct, right? And the flange doesn't sit that far off the grill, just because that's the flange we have. If you can get a longer one, that might be helpful, but just know that there's not much space behind the lower grill. But what you will be doing is you'll be putting a brake duct onto it, and then you'll be using a worm clamp. And so the area around this circle, you want to kind of clear it off, or clearance it. So you'll want to clearance here, here, here. You probably want to take this nub off. You want to clearance this, maybe even potentially that. That way, when you clamp on the worm, the worm clamp, it gets a good bite onto the kind of the flange of the intake. But really, that's it. You can just use a Dremel, cut around it, and if I get a chance, I'll show you that. If not, it's pretty straightforward. All right, guys. So one little thing that I forgot here. When you're putting the riv nuts on, oh shoot, what side is this? Driver. Okay, so when you're putting the riv nuts on, and you've got kind of the riv nut tool running through the flange. If you're starting with the first one, go ahead and use 2 machine screws, and you don't have to actually use the riv nut, but just tighten the riv nut on the other 2 positions so that they slip into the holes on the grill. And that'll help orient the inlet such that when you are tapping or actually securing the riv nut, it's in the right position. Right? That was the whole reason why we went through the whole process of drilling everything in relation to this flange. Once you get the first one in, what you want to do is set up your next hole, and when you get everything going and you've got the tool all kind of rigged up and you're starting to slide the flange in, again, keep a riv nut on the third one so it slips into the hole, and then for the first one, go ahead and position it, and as long as it's glued and secured tightly, screw in your machine screw, just like so, through the flange into the riv nut. That way, when you secure the second riv nut, again, everything's in the correct orientation, and hopefully later as you go down the road or when everything's done, the screws go in nicely. So now that you've got the first and the second one done, moving on to the third one, it's going to be the same thing. Set up the tool, and when you slide everything in before you kind of crimp the riv nut, threading the 2 machine screws for the first and the second one. That way when you crimp the third one, again, it's all in the same in the correct plane or kind of in the right orientation, so that the machine screws don't cross thread and go in nicely. That's a key one. That was the whole reason why we went through that whole process of lining everything up. So forgot to film that part, and just want to make sure you don't miss that. All right, guys, so it's done. I think that was the passenger side that we did, so it's been taken care of. And so just kind of to reiterate, some of the things to watch out for is when you start drilling, make sure to use the inlet as a guide as to how to drill the holes. That way everything lines up afterwards, i.e. the plate, the block off plate to the inlet and the inlet to the grill. That way everything lines up and isn't kind of crooked or slightly off or clocked. The trick with using the Riv Nut tool through the inlet, I would do it, and the reason why I would do it is because it did a better job of aligning the Riv Nuts to the inlet. It's a tough one because the grill again is curved, and on mine there are definitely some screws that are difficult to thread in, and this one it's much easier. I can do everything by hand. So definitely on mine, on the first one I made, it's a little bit clocked, and you kind of have to chase the thread back and forth to get the screw to fit or to go in. So what does that mean? So in case you are someone, or in case when you're making yours, you do run into this problem, if it's stuck, what you can do is turn it down until it starts to jam up, give it a little bit more, and then back off. And then come back down on it where it starts to jam up, and then back off. And keep doing that. And each time you do that, go a little bit further in the rotation, and that'll slowly chase the thread of the Riv Nut, because it's a soft material, so that you can get your machine screw in. What's another thing to look out for? If the Riv Nuts pull out, chances are you're not going to be able to use the same Riv Nut or same size Riv Nut in the hole, because the plastic is soft. Once the Riv Nut has kind of expanded inside the hole, it's going to deform the plastic. So just super glue it. I've got 2 Riv Nuts on the other side over here, the driver's side, that had that problem. It's kind of a learning curve with the tool, because it's new, but it's fine. With the super glue, I've got it mounted. It's not an issue. It's totally cool. And then the last one would be, again, the clearance. So let's see if we can see it here. Just make sure, because you don't have very much space with the inlet, and you're going to use a worm clamp right here. Just make sure you clear around the diameter of the flange so that you can slide the worm clamp as far up onto this as possible. It's pretty simple. I don't think I really need to show you guys how to do that. Just take a Dremel and hit these spots. It'd be nice to have a clamp with you so you can kind of test fit it over and over again. And that's pretty much it. So that's how you take your lower grill and turn it into an inlet for brake ducts. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. And as always, we'll see you at the next video. Take care.